Welcome to another episode of Connecting the Toms. I'm Julie, your trauma-informed movement coach.
I'm Dr. Thom in beautiful Arizona.
And today we're going to be diving into the world of breath work. And I just want to start off this podcast by saying that for some people, the word breath work might be a little bit apprehensive. They might be, like, oh, yeah, I breathe, I'm okay. What we want to do is really dive into the different types of breath work that can help support your healing because we know this is a fantastic portal to the parasympathetic state that your body needs to be in order for you to heal. So that being said, if you're someone that comes from the Ayurvedic world, or if you come from the somatic world, or the trauma healing world, whatever background you have, we may be using different terminology that but hopefully we want you understand that there are certain techniques. If you have trauma, which we all know everybody does because you've been listening to our podcast, everybody has trauma, epigenetics, right? If you have trauma, there are certain breath exercises that won't resonate with your nervous system yet. And so what is important, what I personally want to get across with this podcast is helping you understand your own body and understand that what like it being told to do alternate nostril breathing, for instance, that may not resonate with you, and that's because of your trauma right now. So there are different exercises that we can offer to get you going in terms of befriending your nervous system, and we want to dive into that a little bit. So Dad, did you want add anything else to that before I do our first breathing exercise today?
No, start with the exercise and then we'll talk a little bit more about breath work itself.
Okay, so the breath exercise that I would like to take you through today is called heart focused breathing. So, what you're going to do with this one is you're going to touch your hand to your heart and imagine breathing into the heart area. What we're going to do is we're going to breathe in for 5 to 6 seconds and then breathe out to 5 to 6 seconds. What I'd like you to do is focus on a memory that evokes a positive feeling or of something, feeling of joy, something of love, something peaceful, gratitude, compassion, whatever word resonates with your nervous system. And we're going to do this for 3 minutes. Okay. So the magical number of three. I love that number three. This is going to help you engage your parasympathetic nervous system and get some energy, get clearer thinking. It's going to improve body function and less body pain, possibly. So we're going to find out. So the only way we really know is to try it, right? And so for those of you that listen to our last podcast, we talk about HRV. So what you could technically do before you do this exercise with me is pause, go get your HRV or test it on the Visible app or whatever thing you have. Test it now. We're going to do the exercise and then test it after. And you're going to see biologically, did this exercise help me feel better? Right. And then if you don't want to do that, that's fine. Then you're just going to, what I'd like you to do right here, right now, is I want you to assess how you feel on a scale of 1 to 10. Just, just take a quick body scan. I'm feeling just it's early morning. We're starting this podcast early, right? So, how are you feeling first thing? And that, or if you're listening to this at night, what are you at? Okay, cool. Are we good, Dad?
Let's go.
All right, here we go. So go ahead and place a hand on your heart. If you want to place both hands on your heart, you can, or one hand on on your heart and one hand behind your head, wherever you feel comfortable. But I'm gonna do personally. I'm gonna do my hands on my heart. Okay, go ahead, and just gonna count your timing, and we're gonna do this for 3 minutes. You just focus on a memory that evokes positive feeling, joy, love, peace, gratitude, and compassion. Begin now. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Release. 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out. 1, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4, 5. And out. 3, 4, 5. In. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And out. 3, 4, 5. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. Breathe in, out. Breathe in, release. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. In, out. Breathe in, last minute. Breathe out. Inhale, exhale. In, out. Last 30 seconds. In, release. Breathe in, out. Breathe in, last time, and fully release your last breath and bring all the joy, peace, gratitude, and compassion to your heart. Well done. Come on back. Now you got to wake up. How'd that feel for you, Dad?
Well, it's like many of the techniques, it's the one that resonates the most, but I suspect that our listeners, like me, are very relaxed. It's a very comforting thing. It's going to be a great way to put into your day at any point of the day. But we'll talk about other techniques and that kind of stuff. So it's obviously going to feel good. I can't imagine somebody not appreciating that for 3 minutes, just, taking
Yeah,
taking
good
a
point.
break from whatever their day is, per se, which makes us realize, oh, I need to do this more often, which is really
Right.
what breath work is all about.
Exactly. I think yeah, and I mean what you're saying too is I think a lot of times people forget and they just don't have the prompt to, hey, I have 3 minutes. What can I do, to support myself and regulate helps, self-regulate myself. And so coming from someone who I when I'm in work mode, I'm going like 100 miles an hour, and then let's say I get a last minute cancellation. So when I go from 100 to 0, I really struggle. So I found that doing this type of breathing helps me like downshift from that 100 to maybe an 80. So I'm not just going straight to 0, because that's so uncomfortable in the nervous system when you're like, go, 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 survival, survive, survive. And then it's like, boom, you got a break. What do I do now? And I think doing some type of breath work can definitely help that. So, um, okay. So the thing that's important to know with breath work is breath work in terms of trauma. There are a whole bunch of different techniques that we can um, offer you, and we'll dive into that a little bit more. But the idea is, um, what can breath work really offer you? So just know that breath work is a therapeutic practice centered on the conscious control of your breath, and it's holistic healing. It's a deliberate, so it involves deliberate breathing exercises and techniques. The idea is that we want to reduce stress, promote relaxation, and release emotional tension. And for me, I feel that it's an easy portal, easy doorway for people to gain insights into what they may be holding on to. So emotions tend to get stuck in our body, and they can show up as dis-ease, but a lot of times, if you're just sitting here, just what I want you to do is just take a pinch. What does your jaw feel like? Just like open your mouth a little bit and shake it around, drop your shoulders, right? And just notice, am I holding tension anywhere in my body? right now. And what breath work can do is that it helps us bring awareness to where I might be holding tension in my body and actually offer you an opportunity to release it. So breath work has a profound impact on your body, specifically because it influences the physiological processes and promoting overall well-being. So, um, Dad, do you want me to, like, I have a list of like 9 things that it actually breath work actually does for us physiologically. Do you want me to go through that, or do you want to dive into breath work and what you're seeing?
Am I going to take a step back for people, first of all? And, you know, interestingly, in society, we always have this idea, oh, this is something that's new. No, that's something couldn't be farther from the truth. COVID is the type of thing that I have found, in practice, in seeing patients for the last half century, that breath work is something that people almost had more time to do. People were alone, they were bored. What am I going to do? You start hearing about the amount of stress that people were under during the whole pandemic. How am I going to get through this? How am I going to? I was isolated, et cetera, et cetera. So, like many things that happen, I would say it became more popular. But I want to remind people that yoga has been around for centuries, many centuries. A couple of thousand, 3,000 years, perhaps, maybe even longer. So it's not something that's new. It was realized, before the time of Christ, that breathing was something that could be controlled manually as well as automatically, which is what we do most of the day in general. And so yoga was a practice that was developed more about breath work and breathing than it was about the actual postures. The postures are from a physical aspect. The breath work, I would say, as you said, is almost more about the emotional aspect and the spiritual aspect and connecting with the, outer world, if you like, the world that's outside of our physical body. And so the postures allow us to do resistance. It allows us to strengthen our actual frame. But the breath work is the connection to the, let's say, the outside world beyond our physical structure. So what I found, as as people have done that and are aware of that, what I found is that more and more of my patients are starting to now develop a sense of, oh, I actually can feel that I'm stressed, because the vast majority, 99.99% of people, that when I ask them, and I ask all patients, what's your stress level like? Some will say, oh, it's awful, off the chart. And I'll say, in what regard? And invariably, it'll be a specific thing. It'll be a specific thing like their work, colleagues in their work situation, their living situation. I mean, it will be specific. And so I'll say, well, you know what the first stress that you experience every day is? And they'll say, well, it's getting to work. I said, no, before that. And the first stress that we experience is going from a lying to a standing position, which really, that's a stress. Yeah. Can you tell it? No, I can't tell that that's a stress. But when people have over a period of time are practicing breath work, what they start to realize is that they start to feel that there's a physiologic change going from lying to standing. And that's because we're starting to activate our sympathetic nervous system. And we know that when we're standing, walking, moving, our body immediately goes into the place of flight and fright. And so we know that 60% of the day we spend in that particular system uh, of protection, survival, if you like. And the goal is to get 40% of the day back into the parasympathetic. But we live in a lifestyle that it's in my patients anyway, it's sympathetic dominance is overwhelming where most people live. And those of you who have been with us through all these podcasts know we have talked over and over about the importance of allowing yourself to get into a parasympathetic state. and not just the time when you're eating your meals, which is required for digestion to occur properly, but also when you're sleeping and getting restful sleep. So that after you've slept 7.5 to 8 hours, the goal is not, oh my God, feel like I haven't slept yet, or oh my gosh, the day is ready to begin. I truly am refreshed. I'm ready to go. It's going to be another great day, just like yesterday was, just like last week was. But we know that unfortunately, many people in society, that's not what they sense. So the function today is to, you can go through your nine things of breath work at this point, what it physiologically is going to do. But we have to start somewhere. And, people say, oh gosh, we've already, in the last three, now the third podcast in a row, we've have a different technique for talking about breathing, and there's more to come. So I'm going to let you go through that, and then I'll talk more about what my patients are experiences when we basically are starting with something simple.
But before I do, I just want to reiterate, like, I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about like breath work and emotions. And I think why a lot of people like take breathing for granted is because most of our lives, we've worked really, really hard. When you're in survival, you work really, really hard not to feel. You don't want to feel your emotions. And when we just breathe, or when you actually bring mindful breathing, I'll say, to the table, it actually brings awareness to what I'm feeling. Like you just said, like your patients actually can feel the stress. And I think that's the issue that on the table that people are really not aware of, is that, oh my gosh, or you might be aware, like, oh yeah, I totally disassociate. I like work really hard to not feel what I feel, because let's be honest, feeling can hurt, right? So especially when you have those heavier emotions like shame and guilt and abandonment and feeling, lonely, and all those, like, those are heavy, and but they exist in our body. And when you start doing breath work, what's going to happen is that you're going to start feeling those feelings. And so I think there might be some fear, and that's totally legit for some people, is that they might start breathing and then they start feeling the feelings of fear. And they're like, what do I do now? Right. And now this is where in my world we talk about like holding space for, or leaning into, or um yeah, you just want to, hang out with the emotions that are in your body. And breath work is one of those exercises. Like that's why, like for instance, the heart centered one that we did today, we did it for 3 minutes. We didn't do for one, we didn't do for two, we did it for three, because it does take some time for emotions to be acknowledged in our body. So I don't know if so just like take a step back. So emotions actually come from sensations. So if we just do a little quick nervous system breakdown, how emotions come up is that your body, like we talked about, my dad, so eloquent. I'm like, I love that you talked about it, like with the whole orchestra, the brains, the conductor, and the organs of this are the instruments. And it just gave me such a powerful visual in terms of what can I do to create the symphony in my body. And breath work allows that to happen. And sometimes the symphony isn't, tuned properly because I haven't been feeling certain emotions, or I haven't, really brought awareness to a particular area. And I've been using that. And I've also been using a whole gardening analogy. So, um, yeah. So the whole idea is that by doing breath work, there's going to be a physiological shift in your body. So I'll go through the nine of them for you. And I want you to keep in mind that, like there are going to be shifts in your body of what's actually happening. But the idea is we want to keep practicing it. It's not just a one and done. We don't just do the heart focused breathing like once a week and be like, okay, I did it. I did what they just said. We want to practice something that can allow us to hang out with, hold space for, or lean into whatever emotions do show up. So physiologically, what does breath work actually offer you? It actually offers stress reduction, which we all know that most people, if you're listening to this, you have stress. We've talked about the stress bucket. We've talked about HRV, oxygenation obviously increases your oxygen supply. And so just on a side note with this is that, so for some of the breathing exercises, some people will do it and they get this like dizziness, or like kind of brain fog, not brain fog, but they get dizzy. And that's because there's an O2 CO2 imbalance. And that's just when we actually slow down your breathing, we're going to change the pressure in your brain and body. So yeah, so we can talk about that later if you want. But obviously heart and blood pressure. So that's something we're actually going to talk about in our next podcast on how we can help our heart and blood pressure, lung function, obviously by improving your lung capacity, detoxification. So if you didn't already hear, if you haven't heard it already, we've talked about this before. In order to detoxify, you breathe it out, you pee it out, or you sweat it out. Breathing super powerful to get rid of those toxic invaders. Pain management. So just side note, yesterday we bought my daughter some new dressers yesterday, and they were freaking heavy. And let me tell you, if I did not practice my breathing, I probably would have like dropped these things on my foot and hurt myself. But breath work, oh my God, it was super helpful when moving heavy furniture, just have to say. So anyway, emotional regulation, that's what I'm talking about. I think that's where a lot of people might be hesitant on breath work, because it does allow you, it opens that door for feeling your emotions. Mind body connection, obviously mindfulness. When you actually slow down, you actually get to hang out with and be mindful and bring that awareness, because the first step to healing, first step of healing club, as I always say in my groups, is awareness. So it's really that mind body connection. Breath work brings that awareness to, where am I holding tension in my body. And lastly, immune function. So we all know that when we are stressed, our immune system goes down. So breath work is a fantastic way to boost your immune system. So there's some amazing benefits, but I think, like, I don't know, what are your thoughts on the whole emotional link to breath work and why people might be hesitant? I'm like, that to me is like, oh my God, that makes sense why somebody wouldn't want to try it, because I actually have to feel like, oh my God, I don't want to feel. But that's
That's probably more the reason that they don't continue, more so than, and plus the fact that it's an automatic, it's an unconscious behavior. And so most people are not don't focus on their breathing because of the fact they said, well, why do I have to do that? We have brought up in previous podcasts that, in the turn of the 1900s, the average person only was breathing 5, 6, 7 times a minute. Now it's 16, 17, 18, 20 times a minute. I said, whoa, what's happened in between? Probably based on what we've just already been talking about, is that we went from a totally aspect of doing things in the 1900s for relaxation, but now with the chronic stressors that our society has put upon ourselves, we basically have just continued to make it an automatic behavior. And the aspect of starting to feel things that you may know or may not know, it totally makes sense that the emotional aspect, and I suspect that this is the whole component that why yoga became so popular, and has maintained one of the oldest traditions as far as healthcare is concerned, is the aspect of consciousness, to try and allow yourself to appreciate what are you truly feeling, not anger or abandonment or wondering why you have it, but tapping into the underlying reason, which is why, of course, we do the whole brain protocol therapy with people, which is why breathing and breath work and lymphatics and water and all our other basic treatment guidelines are absolutely essential. Um, is one more essential than another? Is this one that we're talking about on this podcast more essential? No, it's another tool. It's another tool, just like drinking enough water is a tool. Just like doing an HRV is another tool. Just like getting enough sleep is another tool. So these are all pictures. These are all pieces of the thousand piece puzzle, and they're not a single piece. They're multiple pieces because there's many pieces of it, but you can't leave it out. So what we want you to leave this podcast with is the idea that how essential that this component is, and it's just as important as doing a Kestrel pack. It's just as important as drinking, half your body weight in water. It's just as important as dry skin brushing. It's just as important as getting enough sleep, being in routine, et cetera, et cetera. And none of these should be sort of put on the background. And if anything, this may be one of the easiest ones to do once you are in the habit of doing it. And that's probably for most people the greatest challenge. So what I've started to recommend, and it's interesting the pushback you get. We know that just in general, away from breathing, we see more and more recommendations that every hour you should get up and move. You should change your vision. You should not keep staring at a computer screen or keep your nose in a book or whatever it is that you're doing for that period of time. And so what I've started to recommend to people is that every hour on their phone or a note or a little alarm, that they stand up and move for that 1 minute. And in that 1 minute, I'm saying, while you're moving, the best thing you should do is do, uh, you know, and I'm starting with box breathing, but I'll talk about a patient and later at the podcast. And so basically, if you do box breathing, 4 in, hold for 4, out for 4, wait for 4, you do that 4 times, you basically have taken your minute up. So every hour, if you do that, meaning you do it multiple times a day, and the people say, "Well, I won't remember to do that." I said, "Then just put notes. Put a note on your kitchen cupboard. Put a note on the dashboard of your car. Put a note note on your bathroom mirror. Places that you're going to see it. And like anything, once you start to do it, it'll become a habit. And maybe it'll take you 3 months or 6 months to get in the habit of doing it. But if you put it in your car, uh, what I personally do is every time you're at a stoplight, you see it because it's right there, and you're sitting there for 1 or 2 minutes. It's like, oh, this is a great time to do that. Standing in line at the bank, standing in line at the grocery store, standing in line, in a movie theater, wherever, you just get in the habit of when you're standing, it's the perfect opportunity to put yourself into that space. So breathing, I won't say it's elevated to a more important component of the basic treatment guidelines, but it has become more evident the importance and the feedback from the patients, as you said earlier, is that people are starting to be able to feel that they're stressed. They're starting to know that their stress is building up, and they are then taking the opportunity to do a technique that is the most, maybe they haven't found it yet, but they're trying different ones as we are sharing in the podcast, and we'll continue to share, because one, not one size fits all, but you have to start somewhere. And an easy one to start with that I found with patients is just try box breathing. But I'll save a comment about that later. I'll let you chime in here.
Okay, so I got a couple things. So, first, going back to the yoga statement, I wanna, like you talked about, like the type of yoga you're talking about is more like Eastern style, because I find that there's a big difference between Eastern yoga and Western yoga. So, it's been an ancient practice, and unfortunately, a lot of people go to a yoga class, and and I'm definitely one of those people. I'm yoga teacher certified, and what happened though, because I was taught more Western minded, I actually, like, my mom was certified in yoga and used to teach it, and I used to go to her classes, and it was much more, she was taught more classical, like Eastern and whatnot. But for me, the Western style became very competitive. It wasn't really about like the breath work. It really, like, I would show up and I'm like, I'd be doing a pose and I'm like, well, I was able to do this last time. And I was always like getting better and better. And I'm like, oh, that girl's really flexible. Why am I not that flexible? And blah, blah, blah. It's comparison. So, I just want to say, like, the yoga you're talking about is that Eastern practice, and it is very different from the Western practice, what we see today. So there are different, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, not analogies, but like, uh, principles that they teach. It's different. It's like, I feel like Western has, it became like a workout for people, and yoga is not a workout. It's about offering a space for you to, like my dad's been talking about, a space for you to slow down and connect with yourself and really, hang out with, this parasympathetic part of you and just check in on what's happening inside of you. So that's one thing I want to say. the other thing, like you're just talking about, is like habit stacking. So you put the notes 100%. That's a like I use that with my clients as well. But to complement what you're saying, yes, put the notes. Another thing you could do, and this is from the behavior change model. What you do is you stack it with something that you already do every day. So let's say like I'm gonna do a breath work exercise. Let's say you make coffee every day. You're gonna do it before you turn on the coffee maker, or when before you pick up your coffee, you're going to do a breath work. Before you sit down for your meal, you could do it then. Like my dad said, at a stoplight, I do the same thing. um, I do different ones. And so what you do is just pick every time I check my email, because there's actually something called email apnea. I don't know if people know this, but when people read their email, they actually hold their breath. So this is, like, oh yeah, if you're that person, you're like my dad has a bajillion emails, like you're like, and then you hold your breath, and yeah, it's a thing. So maybe doing a breath work exercise before you open your email, or do it after, whatever. Stack it with something that you already do every day, right, at the end of the day. And that's what I recommend to my clients. So then it's easier. You're like, oh yeah, I'm doing the thing, okay, I'm gonna do my breath work. And then it's just like it becomes that snap habit, right? It's already something that I already do. Because I find a lot of people, when they're trying to um change a habit or bring in habits, a lot of times, and this is where I talk about the garden analogy. This is my final thing, so I'll let you tell about your 444. The garden analogy I like to use is breath work. Is a fabulous way to think about, like, my dad in his book, and in the brain protocol, talks about like what we're trying to do is really navigate your terrain. And so what I was talking with a friend about is that, imagine that you right now are just trying to tend to your terrain. And so the question is, are you spending most of your time pulling weeds, tilling the soil, finding rocks? Or are you using the old school, ox, and that whatever machine was behind the ox to till the garden? Or do you have the state of the art, fancy dancy, multi-million dollar tractor that you're, tending to your terrain? Which one of the tools are you using, really, at the end of the day? Or are you focused on nurturing your soil? Are you watering it? Are you fertilizing it? And what are you, how are you tending to? So I want you to think about breath work as a way of, is this breath work exercise, like my dad's going to talk about with his patient, does box breathing, for instance, is that, am I using that to pull, like to pull the weeds? Is that is it more of an outward type of exercise, or is it more, I'm nurturing? Am I pulling, or am I pushing, or pulling, if you think of it that way, right? Am I planting, or am I tending, right? So there are different ways to look at it in terms of breath work. And that's what I found in my world, is that, so there's a bajillion different exercises, like, honestly, like, even on my list, I think I have like 15 different ones. So like fire breathing is going to be very different than 478 breathing, or 421 breathing, or 444. Or you're like, oh my God, I don't know what you're talking about. Everybody, and that's the other thing too, is everybody has a different name. Alternate nostril breathing, figure eight breathing, hand tracing breathing, anxiety breathing, blowing out the candle. Oh my God, there's so many I can go on. But if you just choose, like my dad's going to talk about, like box breathing, if you think about it, how does that support your garden in your terrain? Okay, just think of it that way. Am I planting, or am I pulling? Is this a time that I found some weeds, I got to go to pull the weeds? Okay, I'm going to use this box breathing as an exercise to pull the weeds, and so that my garden can grow. And the thing too is like, over there in that little plot, what am I going to plant over there? Am I going to plant some flowers, or some vegetables, or some trees? I don't know. It's up to you, right? For me, when I talk to my clients, it's become a very visual, and very, you're like, oh my God, I get that. I get that. So then that makes it easier for you to be able to make that switch, to be like, okay, what breathing drill am I going to do? Am I planting, or am I pulling? Right. And then you can go from there. Cool. Okay. I'll let you talk about your client now,
No,
or
that's
patient.
great. It's a great aspect of trying to go into the real depth of why we're doing this particular podcast. And and as you started, and as you just said, there's many different types of technique. And so what's become interesting also, as I put more emphasis on that with patients, is patients are coming back and say, it's not easy to do. it's really difficult to do it properly if you're going to do it properly,
Yes.
because people will say, well, I'll take a deep breath, and they go, I mean, that's kind of the end of it. They just think that it just means breathe in as much air as you can and then breathe it out. We're actually talking about something that actually has a much more therapeutic benefit. But just this week, there was a couple of patients that came in, and in a previous visit, I had talked to them about box breathing, which is the 4-4-4-4, a simple way of doing it, and they both came back and said, that didn't work at all for me. I didn't like it. It didn't do anything for me. So I said, well, what did you do? So interesting, you just mentioned it. So the one gentleman said, oh, what really works for me is the 4-7-8. He
Yeah.
says, I go to bed, I can't shut my brain off. My brain is active and busy, and I'm ruminating, and then I can't fall asleep, or I wake up and I can't shut my brain off. He said the box breathing did nothing but the 4-7-8. And so, we're not here to basically tell you every technique of what that means, but because Dr. Google knows everything, if you just put in four,
Yeah.
seven, eight and breathing,
You'll know.
Dr.
We'll
Google
do
will
one of them.
will show.
Listen to
Yeah,
future
well,
podcasts. We'll do 478, just so you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the idea is that for some people, box breathing is not going to be satisfying, but
Yeah.
4-7-8 is, or as Julie just said, one of the other techniques. We started off today with 3 minutes trying
Heart
to
focused.
associate focus the heart breathing. So we have all these types of things, but the bottom line is there is a technique. There is one of the techniques, whatever you want to call it, that is going to be the most effective for you because of your terrain, because of your past experiences, because of your learned perceptions of how you interact with the world, because of your belief systems, et cetera, et cetera. So we are not here to tell you the end all be all and the right way to do it. We're here to say that there's many ways, there's many roads that lead to Rome. We're trying to open the pathway for you to be realistic and understand that this is something that I really need to be practicing on a regular basis, and to try and make it a part of my everyday life. Just like I get up every day, I eat every day, I drink water every day, et cetera, et cetera. Breathing is an unconscious behavior, but it's a natural law, obviously. But now we're trying to because of the level of education we've hopefully imparted over the last couple of years of doing these podcasts, you're and listening to this one, you're starting to realize that this is something that's easy to do. It's always with you. You don't need any equipment. It's very inexpensive. Doesn't cost you anything
It's
because you're
free.
already doing it. It's
It's free. Take
totally
two.
free. You
It's
know,
free.
the
Take two.
the a- the aspect of, people think, oh, this biological medicine is expensive. This one is natural laws are not that expensive. You make an
No.
investment in some castor oil and a flannel and that kind of thing, but you're already doing everything else. So, but yet the benefits go without saying that these are the types of things which will help. We'll talk about in the next podcast that many of our listeners have been asking about because they are taking different medications for product or condition XYZ. Is there a way to incorporate these types of things which will allow me to, maybe wean off some of these things or wean down on a dosage or whatever? And so it'll be a broken record, but guess what? We're going to talk about some of these same type things as a reminder of what people are doing on an everyday basis. So the clients, my patients are certainly engaged in this process. They are engaged in the aspect of looking for things that they can do for themselves. Doing it once a day is better than no times a day. Doing it multiple times a day makes it become a habit. But we put no time limit on this. You're going to be breathing the entire rest of your life. So you have the entire rest of your life to figure out which one works the best for you. And it won't take that long because you're going to find some work better than others, just as my clients this week are already giving me feedback in regard to that. So we can move forward from that perspective of the importance of how breath work becomes an important healing component no matter what challenges that you're dealing with in your own personal life.
Exactly. I mean, you said it perfectly. So all I'm going to say is just to parrot there is no right way to breathe. You just have to find the one that resonates with you and your nervous system. And that's why it's like there's nothing wrong with you if box breathing doesn't work. There's nothing wrong with you if 478 doesn't work. You know, there's different ones. So if you do go to a yoga class and they're like, you should be able to do this, and you're like, I can't, because you can't hold your breath that long afterwards, that's okay. Like, I'm that person. Like, I do not hold my breath very well after an exhale. I'm that person, but I also know that's part of my trauma history. So when you can start, understanding why your body responds in certain ways and then just lean into that, there's definitely some freedom that comes on the tail end. So but like my dad said, we're going to be talking about, next podcast, we're going to be talking about, is it possible to get off some prescription drugs, and because I know that's something that I get asked that a lot as well. Like, can I take drugs while I'm doing these other things? And we'll dive into that. So thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you supporting us, and we look forward to talking to you next time.
Talk to you soon.